welcome to Weather Wednesday. This is a new segment we'll be doing every Wednesday at Quantum Hedging, and I will be kind of talking about what's driving weather, what's going on in weather, and how is that impacting either yields and or commodity prices. And so, this is a topic that really interests me. I've always kind of been fascinated by weather growing up on a farm, and weather is obviously so instrumental in what happens in terms of productivity on the farm. For those of you that get our daily email on weather, you'll see some of these graphics in here. Things like the GFS forecast. So every day we're bringing in the GFS forecast for the next 10 days and kind of giving you a visual of how that temperature and precipitation looks in the major growing regions of the U.S. We also put out some unique graphics. I've always been someone who I like to look at maps, but sometimes it's hard to tell how impactful is the weather in terms of the crop I care about. And so we actually take this, very granular weather data that is a map-based object, if you will, and we synthesize it down to a point on every day based on the corn in the U.S. growing area. And so, Iowa, Illinois, those states are obviously very important in terms of corn production. So they get more weight in our kind of creation of these indices. And so we every day put out a U.S. temperature forecast, a U.S. Precipitation forecast. And that gives you a sense of kind of how that plays in terms of the crop. Now, the question you might have as we turn the calendar into August is, what's the yield going to be? And right now, USDA is at 181 for corn. And there's some private analysts that are pretty much around there too. I think everyone is kind of leaning in the direction this will be a record year. And the question is how big? And so, one of the things I thought would be interesting to do is just kind of look at this year's weather and compare it to past years, and particularly look at some extremes. Let's look at extreme years of bad yields and look at extreme years of good yields, because we've had some hot temperatures here. I know those of you in the South in particular have really been under relentless heat. And so let's kind of synthesize it down. And so what I'm going to do is look at kind of what I'll call the main thrust of the growing season. That'll be calendar time period, June 1 to August 15th. Kind of arbitrary, I know, but I think it encompasses the bulk of the growing season. And so I'm looking back over 20 years of this time period of roughly 2.5 months, June 1st to August 15th. Now, in that 20 years, I picked out the kind of worst 4 years for yield. These are years when yields were off sharply from the previous record yield. And then I also looked at record yield years. So in other words, when we achieved a new record. And so I picked out the 4 best years when we were able to achieve a new and higher record yield. And so let's start with the bad yield years. This is the table on the left, and that's denoted with the red boulder here. And so what you'll see, first of all, is, the crop year that these are associated with, 95, 2005, 2011, and 12. And, all of us will probably remember 2012 really, really well because it was extreme. But the other years were, bad, but not all that bad. And so, if we look at, for example, 95, what made 95 so problematic was not just the weather, but also the late planting. It was really behind pace in terms of planting. So you kind of had a double whammy for that crop. You had a late planting and hotter, drier weather, especially hot. And so when we look at kind of, this data here, what you'll see is, kind of the average maximum temperature is, call it in the upper 70s, low 80s. 81 was 2012's average. And this is across the entire growing region, the entire 2.5 month period. And again, these values are weighted by the corn area in every given county in the U.S. So that's kind of where there. You also see total precipitation that fell, again, weighted by corn area over the 2.5 month period. Now, what I'm going to focus on, though, is kind of a unique statistic, and that is if you look at the periods, in other words, the number of days and the area where temperatures were above 90 degrees. That's when agronomists tell us we start to do a little bit of damage to the corn crop. The higher we get above 90, the worse it is. So I just kind of put a threshold of, does it get above 90 in any given area on any given day? And then I just kind of added it all up for a particular year. And so these percentages here, a little hard to interpret, but the way to think about it is the higher the percentage, that means just the more extreme we saw 90-degree weather in that particular year. And so what you can see in these bad yield years, especially 2012, we had a lot of high 90 or upper 90 readings, and on average across these 4 years, it was 28%. Precipitation in those 4 years was about just a little shy of 8% or 8 inches, 7.9. All right, so that's the bad yield years. That's the setup here. Let's look at the record yield years. So these are 94, 2004, 2009, 2014. No real late plantings here, no real struggles with planting, getting done, getting to May 25th pretty quickly. And, you can see the temperatures, if you kind of look at them side by side to the record or the bad yield years, certainly lower max temperatures. And the really important statistic, again, is that, how much did we see greater than 90 degrees? And it was pretty low, only about 9% on average for these 4 years. And precipitation was higher. In the drought years or the bad yield years, we had 7.9 inches of precipitation over this 2.5 months. And in the record yield years, we had 9.7. So bad yield years, record yield years. What about this year? Well, that's the purple one down at the bottom. So we don't know what the yield's going to be. If we sit at 181, that's about a 2% increase above record yield. So not a big improvement above record yield, but still, sizable, especially in the situation we're in with kind of a bearish market. So, planting was a little behind, but not overly so, in the 80%. You can see temperature, max temperature at 77 degrees. That's higher than any of the 4 record yield years. And also corn area greater than 90 degrees at 15.5%, also higher than the 4 years of record yields. But we have more precipitation. 10.4 is higher than the mean of the record yield years at 9.7. So don't know exactly how that'll play out, but I don't think there's much in the weather data records that we see here to suggest anything other than at or near record yields. I think it's definitely possible given what looks to be a fairly favorable situation. This year's 90-degree readings are maybe not as good as some of the other record yield years, but they're certainly nowhere as bad as what we've seen in bad yield years. So, probably leaning more to the upside. So we'll see what USDA prints on Monday. Pro Farmer will be out in the fields August 19th. We'll be doing a webinar with our good friends at Terrametrics on August 15th and releasing it August 16th. So we'll hope you'll be able to follow along with that. Have a great day, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.